So there's not really a lot I can do as an intro to talk about this Houston Texans team because there is not a lot of things really to talk about. Everything that I could talk about is something that is national news as a Houston Texans fan. There is the Deshaun Watson dilemma of not only is he not showing up to camp because of his own personal issues, but he has issues that are downright disgusting if any of them are true. And that is coming from a Texans fan who never really believed in the guy in the first place. Last year was a complete dismal year for me as a Texans fan. Not only did Deshaun Watson probably have the best year of his career, it came at a time where he possibly was doing a lot of things off the field that were very unethical and very, like I said, disgusting. And the team also was just absolutely terrible. We ended up losing J.J. Watt in free agency this year. The team looked nothing like a good NFL franchise. And not only that, we didn't even have our first two picks in the first and second round of this year's draft. So not only were we really bad, we didn't get any talent either. Now I will say, one player that we did add, and I'm going to talk about him later, is Davis Mills. I have appreciated what I've seen from Davis Mills so far in the preseason. And even though I said that we got no talent in the draft, Davis Mills was by far the most talented player that we drafted. But that's just how bad that last year was for this team. So let's stick with last year before we get into this year and kind of talk about what this team did well last year. For a team that was 4-12 and was one of the laughing stocks of the NFL, it's weird thinking that this was probably one of the worst teams in the NFL and they weren't even last in the division. That's how bad the Jacksonville Jaguars last year were. But the Texans, I mean, they were fourth in passing yards, first in yards per attempt. They were 31st in rushing yards, but they were 18th in yards per attempt. So at least I can look at that and say that they were average. Turnovers, they were 9th, 18th in points. They allowed the 31st, or I guess they were 31st in sacks is how I should say that. So they led up the second most. Offensively, this team actually was decent. Like, the points seems kind of weird because this was an air raid offense that didn't turn the ball over a lot. If they actually needed to, they could get 4 to 5 yards on a carry if they needed to. Deshaun Watson, like I said, had the best year statistically of his career, probably last year. And offensively, this was not where they struggled. Now, this defense. Oh, my God. This defense. This has been about a 3-year run leading to the point of them being the worst defense in the NFL. I would not say that where they were before this was the best defense in the NFL, but they at least had a semblance of what to do, how to tackle someone in the open field, how to get pressure on the quarterback, how to take the ball away from the opposing quarterback, how to just do things that good defenses do. Last year, they were 24th in passing yards allowed, 31st in rushing yards allowed, 32nd in takeaways, 27th in points allowed, and 18th in sacks. And actually, I just realized that I said that they were 31st in rushing yards. They were actually 32nd. So they were dead last in rushing yards allowed and takeaways last year. There's nothing really that I can say about this defense that they did last year. Last year was just a year for some of those guys to get integrated to the defense and maybe put on some tape to say that they will be on the team next year. Because, I mean, really, like, nobody played great last year. I understand that J.J. Watt is the best player in the Houston Texans history. He looked like a shell of himself last year. Bernardrick McKinney was the only other guy that had somewhat of a national recognition. He's the only other guy on that team that had a Pro Bowl appearance last year. He was absolutely god-awful. Zach Cunningham led the league in tackles, is really all I can say about this defense. Zach Cunningham is a young star for this Houston Texans defense. Justin Reed is a decent player in the back end of the defense. But, I mean, if your best player is a decent player, you're going to be a really bad team. And that's exactly what they were last year. Now, let's get to who this team lost. And going through some of these names, you're going to think that they lost a lot. But I'm going to convince you that what they lost was not even close to what they gained in this offseason. So they lost receiver Will Fuller on the offensive side of the ball, a couple guards in Zach Fulton and Sunil Clemente, and they lost their starting center, Nick Martin, as well. Like I said, they also ended up losing J.J. Watt to the Arizona Cardinals. They ended up losing Carlos Watkins to, I believe, the Las Vegas Raiders. I could be completely wrong about that. And they also lost outside linebacker Brennan Scarlett as well. So obviously the big name that a lot of people, well, two big names that a lot of people are going to talk about this team losing are J.J. Watt and Will Fuller. On J.J. Watt's side of it, because, like I said, this is the best player in Houston Texans history. This is a guy who's probably going to go down as one of the better pass rushers in NFL history. A guy winning 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards in his time in Houston. No player has done what J.J. Watt has been able to do for the Houston Texans over his, I believe, 10 years there. So, like, watching that man play, I can't do anything but thank what the guy did on the field. Not to mention what this dude did off the field when there was hurricanes, when there was other issues going down in Houston. And when that city needed him to step up and needed someone to be a leader, he was the best guy in that city in terms of a football standpoint, in terms of getting the city back up on its feet. J.J. Watt was the man for the last 8 years. And now he's gone. And I understand that that sucks for this team. And for me, as a fan, I've watched guys like Andre Johnson play for this team for a majority of their career and then leave because the franchise can't get it done in terms of making sure he retires as a Texan. I watched that happen with Arian Foster. I've watched that happen with countless guys on this team where they're really good players. Even though they end up washed up their last couple of years on the team, they're just franchise icons, and you don't want to see them play for other teams. And J.J. Watt has just added to that list. Now, I think that a lot of that is just a new regime has come in. They recognize that J.J. Watt was past his prime. They realized how much money J.J. Watt thought he deserved in free agency and made the correct decision of not bringing him back. Not only has J.J. Watt been able to teach probably some of the things to younger guys on that D-line, like someone like Ross Blacklock, like someone like Charles Omenihu, like an outside backer like Jacob Martin. There's some guys on this defense who should have learned a couple things from J.J. Watt in his time. So I think on that side of the ball, J.J. Watt was able to provide some of that knowledge to those younger guys. As well as the fact that I've already said, like, the price tag that J.J. Watt ended up getting in free agency from the Arizona Cardinals, there's no way that he was getting that in Houston. And if the worst team in the league, I'm just going to call them that, if the worst team in the league is not willing to do that for an icon like J.J. Watt, I think that speaks volumes to how poorly they think he has fallen off from a talent standpoint and from a ability standpoint. And now just real quickly on Will Fuller, I'm going to hate not seeing Will Fuller on my team next year. I am going to admit it. He, over the past 4 or 5 seasons, has been, even though he's been on and off the field in terms of an injury standpoint, the connection that he had with every single quarterback that he played with, whether it was Brian Hoyer, whether it was Brock Osweiler, whether it was Deshaun Watson, there's probably 3 or 4 other guys there's lots of guys I'm not mentioning that Will Fuller caught a pass from. And I'm going to miss not seeing that guy on the Texans next year. Now let's talk about something that actually really excites me about this team, and that is who is new to this team. In the draft, they ended up adding some really good players. They ended up drafting Davis Mills in the 3rd round. They drafted tight end Brevin Jordan out of Miami in the 5th round. I think Brevin Jordan was a guy that was honestly predicted to be going at least in the 4th round, if not the 3rd round of the draft. I think some people even had him up in the 2nd round echelon of players of this draft. So being able to get him in the 5th round, I think it was picked like 150, something like that. So that was a really good value pick as well. And then in free agency, this team became a really professional team almost overnight. You add names like Tyrod Taylor. You add names like Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, and Rex Burkhead to be a trio in your backfield. Not to mention you still have David Johnson at that running back position as well. They signed Chris Conley. They signed guard Lane Taylor from the Green Bay Packers. And on the defensive side of the ball, they did a lot of the exact same things. Linebackers Joe Thomas, Kevin Pierre-Louis, and Christian Kirksey are 3 professional players at that linebacker position. 3 guys who, throughout their career, have not only made their mark on the defensive side of the ball, but they came up being defensive or special team specialists and earned their right to be good players on the defense. They ended up getting a couple great defensive backs as well in Terrence Mitchell and Desmond King. I'm really excited about Desmond King. Like, I hope that guy actually like reinstills some defensive pride in this secondary. It seems like in this preseason things are different for this defense, and I'm just getting excited watching that defense. So let's go ahead and talk about what this year is going to look like for the Houston Texans. It depends on a lot of things. Obviously, it depends on this Deshaun Watson situation. I would love to just have the Texans trade Deshaun Watson at this point. And I wouldn't have even, the fact of his off-the-field issues, I'm just going to leave that at that word. His off-the-field issues, even before then, I think they should have traded him because he was not going to play for this team. And if he's not going to play for a team in which, has given him everything, they took him before Patrick Mahomes. They took him before a lot of other guys in that draft. They have believed in Deshaun Watson from day one. They gave him the second biggest contract in NFL history outside of Patrick Mahomes. They have given Deshaun Watson everything that they can. And I understand that the team is really bad. Guess what? There's a lot of other really bad teams in the NFL. Just because you're on one of them does not mean you have to be an asshole about it the whole time. And that's really all he's done. Putting that aside, whether or not he plays for this team, I think they're going to go 6-11 or 7-10. They're not going to win 4 games again like last year because, like I said, this team has become they've almost become over-professional. And I mean that in a good way because a lot of the names that they signed, it's a lot of one-year deals. It's a lot of come in and, instill a veteran presence within this team and show a lot of the younger guys on this team how to be a professional football player for a majority of your career. And if they're able to instill that in some of these younger guys, if defensively guys like Lonnie Johnson or guys earlier, like I said, like Charles Omenihu, Ross Blacklock, Zach Cunningham, if a lot of these guys are able to step up and get that professional factor under them, then maybe this team, as early as this year, can make the playoffs again. But I really think that it's another 6-11, 7-10 season for this team. And if we do that, I would be so happy as a Texans fan, especially compared to what we got to watch last year to what is going to happen this year. There is going to be a very visible improvement, mostly on the defensive side of the ball, but I think there will be a little bit of an improvement on the offensive side of the ball as well. With all that being said, that's going to be the video from me. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you leave a like. If you didn't, make sure you leave a dislike. Any feedback at this point is much appreciated. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.